Who are you? I do not remember what it was that I said or what it was that I did growing up, but I remember the day that my dad said to me, "Who do you think you are?" And he was disappointed in the decision that I had made. And he wanted to get my attention, and he wanted to humble me. And he did both. So who are you really? Who do you say you are? And who does God know you to be? It can be a different answer for all three of those questions. We have to decide who we are, and we have to own it. If we become a Christian, we should not be ashamed that we are a Christian. Matthew, the 10th chapter, verse 33 says, "But whosoever shall deny me before men, him will I also deny before my Father which is in heaven." There are consequences to not standing up to what we say we believe. But in some things in life, we can have multiple identities. I identify with many groups. My father told me I was an Ingle. He told me it was a well-respected name. And so before you make decisions on what comes out of your mouth or what you do in life, remember you're an Ingle, and that whatever you do or say will be a reflection upon the reputation that the Ingles before you have made. So don't bring shame upon your name, and don't disgrace the Ingle name. When I was in high school, I had loyalty to my high school. I was a Trojan. And I remember a song that came out, some of you probably are familiar with. And one of the first parts of the song says, "What's the matter, fellow? Haven't you heard of my school? We're number one in the state. Be true to your school now." So we learn loyalty to many things in life. Loyalty to our family, loyalty to our school, loyalty to our favorite teams. A lot of us follow college sports, Iowa State, Drake, and UNI. Some of us identify with pro sports. The Chiefs, the Cardinals, the Cubs, the Packers, the Vikings. Some of us identify with car brands. Some of us are Ford people, Chevy, Dodge. I identify with Iowa Midwest values. I'm from the state of Iowa and proud of it. Even if my wife is from Missouri, she is willing to come back with me, IOWA, Iowa, idiots out wandering around. So don't make her angry. I identify with John Denver, and I thank God that I'm a country boy. I thank God I get to drive country roads, lead me home to the place that I belong. I sing with Lee Greenwood. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. I sing with Alan Jackson, where I come from. There's one verse in the song where he's out driving a truck, gets pulled over by the police, and Alan Jackson's from the South. And the policeman says, "I don't know about that accent, son. Just where did you come from?" And I sing with Michael Eldridge, wondering if I'm enough for my God. That's a song in our Purple Books, number 236. All of us have days where we are ashamed of maybe the decisions we made and know that today I wasn't enough of representing God and standing up for who I claim to be. But we can identify with all these things in life. Have you ever known anyone with a split personality or it's lived a double life? My brother lived a double life. He had 2 mailing addresses. And it wasn't until he died that his wife and family learned some of the things that he was hiding. We can hide things from people, but we can't hide from God. You can live a double life, but the Lord knows. We can't hide our secrets from God. We have to choose whose team we're on. We have to choose who we're going to live for. Are you going to live for God or are you going to live for yourself? Matthew 6:24 tells us that no man can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. The book of James in both chapter 1 and chapter 4 tells us that a double-minded man is unstable in all his ways because he's this one day and the next he's something else. We have to choose. If you want to be a Christian, we have to own it. Many spend their entire life trying to figure out who they are. Who am I? Why am I here? And what should I do with my life? We have to learn that we can't pretend to be Christians with one group of people and something else with others. You won't fool the devil or God. You're just fooling yourself. I'd like to go to a couple places that give examples of both. In Acts chapter 19, verse 11 through 17. And God wrought special miracles by the hands of Paul, so that from his body were brought to the sick handkerchiefs or aprons, and the diseases departed from them, and the evil spirits went out of them. Then certain of the vagabond Jews, exorcists, took upon them to call over them which had evil spirits the name of the Lord Jesus, saying, We adjure you by Jesus whom Paul preacheth to be gone. And there were 7 sons of one Sceva, a Jew, and chief of the priests, which did so. And the evil spirit answered and said, Jesus I know, and Paul I know, but who are you? And the man in whom the evil spirits was leaped upon them and overcame them, prevailed against them, so that they fled out of the house naked and wounded. You can try to do something in the name of the Lord, but if you aren't with the Lord, the devil knows. He will destroy you. Now, the other example, we turn to the book of Matthew. So we know you can't fool the devil. You'll pay a price. In Matthew chapter 7, starting with verse 20. Start with 21. Not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. There will be many that say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works? And I will profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. The Lord better be able to identify you as one of his. He will know. We can't fool him. In the book of Daniel, the 3rd chapter, we have a familiar story, verse 16 through 18, I'm going to read. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace. And he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto you, O king, that we will not serve your gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. There was no doubt in these three men's mind that God was capable of delivering them physically if he so desired to do. They knew that maybe he wouldn't, but they knew who they were going to be loyal to. And the Lord rewarded their loyalty by saving them, physically as well as spiritually. So whatever your problems are in life, the point of the lesson today is for you not to limit what you think God can do. It doesn't matter what you're dealing with. God is bigger than the problem. We don't get to pick our parents. You don't get to pick the state that you are born into. You don't even get to pick the country that you get born into. You're an American. Thank God. You don't get to pick the year that you are going to be born onto this earth. We have no control over any of those things, but do you know that you have the power to limit God? God cannot do things for you if you don't believe. Without faith, it's impossible to please him. And as long as we have the wrong mindset, you're limiting God on what he can do for you. If you're going to pray to God, we better believe when we pray that he has the ability to do whatever his will is. Sometimes we don't pray for things that are his will and they don't happen. But we have to believe, just as Samuel's mother did, that God has the ability to help me if I humble myself, and it is the Lord's will to to respond to my prayer request. In 2 Kings chapter 5, we have the story about Naaman who had leprosy and how angry he became when he came to be healed of it. And what was asked of him to do was not what he was expecting at all and made him very angry. And one of his servants, he stomped off in a rage. And one of his servants said, Master, if he had asked you to do something great, you would have done it. Why can't you try doing this simple request and see what happens? And once he decided to do the Lord's will instead of his own, he was healed. We limit God so many times in our lives because we have a perception of what we think the events should be, and we're mostly wrong. The Lord tells us that your ways are not my ways and my thoughts are not your thoughts. I won't do things the way that maybe you perceive they ought to be done. And that was told to us clear back in Isaiah. Now I'd like to turn to the book of Mark chapter 5. The story is basically Mark 5, 25 through 43. And the first part of the story is about a woman that had an issue of blood, and she's had it for 12 years. And I'm just going to go ahead and take time and read this part anyway. A certain woman which had an issue of blood 12 years had suffered many things of many physicians and had spent everything that she had, and nothing made her better, but rather made her worse. When she had heard of Jesus, she came into the crowd from behind and touched his garment. For she said to herself, if I may touch but his clothes, I will be made whole. And straightway the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned about him into the crowd and said, who touched me? Who touched my clothes? And his disciples said to him, you see the multitude thronging around you, and you ask us who touched you? And he looked around to see her that had done this thing, and the woman feared and trembled, knowing what was done in her, came and fell to his feet and told him all the truth. And he said unto her, daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Go in peace and be whole of thy plague. And while he yet spake, there came a ruler from the synagogue's house, which said, thy daughter is dead. Do not trouble the master any further. And as soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said to the ruler, be not afraid, only believe. The child was already dead. And Jesus told the crowd to stay behind and only allowed Peter and James and John to go with him. And they came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and all those that wept and wailed. And when he came in, he said, why do you make this ado and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleeps. And they laughed at him to scorn. But when they put him all out, he took the father and mother into the room where the damsel was and entered therein. And he took her by the hand and said, Talitha cumi, which is being interpreted, damsel, I say unto thee, arise. And the damsel arose and walked, for she was of the age of 12 years old, and they were astonished with great astonishment. So Jesus just told the people, believe that I can help, and there is hope. Oftentimes we reach points in our lives where we doubt there's any hope. God is bigger than any problem we have. In Luke, the 7th chapter, verse 6 through 10 is a story that made Jesus marvel. All right, Luke 7, verse 6. Then Jesus went with them, and when he was now not far from the house, the centurion sent friends to him, saying unto him, Lord, trouble not thyself, for I am not worthy that thou should enter under my roof. Wherefore neither thought I myself worthy to come unto you, but say in a word, and my servant shall be healed. For I also am a man set under authority, having soldiers, and I say, go, and he goes, and another to come, and he comes. Do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard these things, he marveled at him and turned and said unto the people, I say unto you, I have not found so great faith, no, not in Israel. And Jesus healed the servant without even being present, which we know is nothing to God to accomplish. So the point is, God can help us in ways we don't expect. And because we are man and he is God, we don't think the same way that God does. And I want to share with you a story from World War II that I had heard 20 or 30 years ago, and I used it in a previous sermon. But it reappeared recently on YouTube, and so it made me add that to the sermon today. There was a soldier that got separated from his unit. He was behind enemy lines. He knew he was doomed without God's intervention. He prayed for God's help as he hid in one of a series of caves, and he heard the enemy soldiers searching the area. And as he waited to see if he would die, a spider busily spun a web across the cave's opening before the enemy got to his cave. The enemy skipped searching that cave because it had a spider web over it. It's obvious nobody could be in it. Is that how he thought God would help him when he prayed for the Lord to intervene? We have no ability to imagine the ways that God uses his creation to help those that love him. Back in Exodus, the 23rd chapter, we are told about how he used hornets to drive the enemy out of the land ahead of the Israelites. Now, who would have thought of doing that? Man wouldn't have thought of that. My ways are not your ways. My thoughts are not your thoughts. Isaiah 55, 8 and 9. Now, I have 3 stories that I would like to share with you that I believe when God wants to use somebody for his purpose, he can pick them out, whether it happened 2,000 years ago when Paul was picked out when he was still called Saul and persecuting Christians. He was handpicked to be an apostle. And so God used him for good. Now, I ran across this first story a few months ago, and it was one that I didn't remember from school. And if any of you remember the 2016 election, there was a retired neurosurgeon named Dr. Ben Carson. And he's a very religious man. And he was telling this story to this commentator that I seen on YouTube, and he was telling the story of George Washington, the bulletproof president. Has anybody ever heard this story? Well, this happened before the Revolutionary War with Britain, and George Washington was serving as a courier or a messenger to General Braddock of the British Army, and they were in a battle with the Indians. And all the other couriers that were in that group were all killed, except for George Washington. And George Washington had 2 horses shot out from underneath him. He had 4 bullet holes in his jacket, but no flesh wounds. He had bullet fragments in his hair. And the story is about the Indian chief that was part of this battle. When he knew years later, knew that he was near his death, he asked his Indian comrades. He heard that George Washington was in the area, and he said, "You must take me to see this man before I die." And he told George Washington, he says, "I'm an expert marksman. I shot you 17 times. And he said, my fellow comrades shot you many times. And I finally told them to quit shooting at you because you were protected by the Great Spirit." He says, "I had to meet you before I died to see a person that was chosen to be protected." And you can choose to believe this story if you want or not, but I can give you the references on how you can listen to this. So I believe that when the United States was established under biblical principles. That's how our country, our Constitution was written. And as long as we as a country lived as that as a standard, I believe the Lord allowed some things to happen, whether it be the beginning with George Washington or how we got through World War II or whatever. I believe we are where we are because it is the Lord's will. Now, the second story that I want to tell you about is George Washington Carver. How many of you know who George Washington Carver is? All right. But there's a lot of you that don't. So I'm going to give you a few details about George Washington Carver. He was born in 1864 to a slave family. He was black. He was adopted by German immigrants named Carver. He went to Iowa State University, probably one of the very first blacks that ever attended Iowa State. He graduated with a master's degree in agriculture. His professors wanted him to be considered for the Secretary of Agriculture. But Booker T. Washington urged him to come down to Alabama, where the farmers were desperately trying to survive, and cotton was their main crop, and cotton was making the soil lose all its nutrients. And so George Washington Carver got them to switch over and start raising peanuts because peanuts build the soil up. And he was called to appear before Congress because of the radical things that he had discovered about peanuts and all the uses that it could be, and it saved the farmers' economy in the South. And so when he went to appear before Congress, they wouldn't let him in. They didn't know who he was and didn't believe that he was anybody of any significance. He was a black son of slaves. And when somebody finally realized that he was supposed to be there, he went in and he was asked, "How did you come up with all this stuff about peanuts?" And he says, "I learned it from an old book." And they said, "What book was that?" And he says, "The Bible." And he says, "So the Bible told you about peanuts?" "No, the Bible told me about the God that made the peanut. I asked the God that made the peanut to show me things that I could do with the peanut. And he did. And he gave all glory to God for all the things that he accomplished, which is a big part of saving our ag economy back in the 1800s, as well as providing food that would sustain us. And he gave God the glory for all the accomplishments that he made. And this is just a touch upon his life. Now, the third story I want to tell you about where God touched this man's life is a man that was a neurosurgeon, that was a pure atheist, and did not believe that God existed. And he's performed thousands of surgeries as a neurologist. And when he had his youngest son, the first 6 months of that boy's life, the boy would not recognize his mother or father as anything more than a piece of furniture. He would not make eye contact with his parents. He would not smile. And this neurosurgeon was scared out of his mind that he had an autistic child and he would never be able to have a relationship with him. And it took this event in this neurosurgeon's life to consider doing something that he couldn't do for himself, even though he was a neurosurgeon. And one day, at the end of the day, when he was so consumed about his son being disabled, when he got done with his operations that day in the hospital, he went to the chapel. And he says, I don't know why. He got down on his knees and says, I do not know if you exist. I really doubt that you do. But God, if you do exist, show me. I cannot accept not ever being able to connect with my son. And he claims that he heard a voice for the first time in his life. He had never heard voices before or since then. But this voice came to him and said, but that's what you're doing to me. You're not acknowledging me. And so this neurosurgeon says that he responded, I won't do that anymore. And he got baptized. And 2 days later, his son was a normal child and is in law school now to be a lawyer. And so this neurosurgeon, he's got several videos on YouTube now and showing how he did not believe there was a soul before this happened. And he was talking about his operations, and I did not know this happened, but he says some of his brain surgeries, the patient is awake. And they do different electrical stimulations in the brain, and they just use a local anesthetic to get to the brain. And, but he was so touched by this experience that he feels that God answered his prayer. Whatever you're dealing with, God is bigger than your problem. If you will have the faith and the commitment to show God who you really are instead of who we think we are, and own it that you're a Christian, He will own you. We bring this lesson to a close and hope that God has been glorified and we have been encouraged to identify with Him. If we can help you, your chances now as we stand and sing an invitation song.